All right, this week your research paper literature review is due. Also, don't forget, you also need to turn in all the other previous parts of the research paper that you have turned in previous week's assignments that I have graded and commented on, and you've made the updates to those comments. So with this literature review, you will also turn in your corrected title page, your corrected abstract, your corrected introduction, and your corrected thesis. And for the first time, you will turn in your literature review. Next time, we'll deal with the conclusion, but I do cover it a little bit in this PowerPoint. All right. Literature review, or what we call the lit review, is you've conducted all your research. So you've done all your research. You have your at least 4 main references that are required. I think there's a book, there's at least 1 journal article, there's a magazine, a newspaper, and there's 1 internet reference you have to utilize, and we'll go over that in a minute. Now you're going to have all your research out. I'm more of a tangible person, so I like to have that research in my hand so I can look at it, highlight it, number it, take notes on it. Some people like it to be in your computer where you can look at it and have several pages open at once. It's just kind of what type of writer and learner you are that works best for you. All right, by now, after you've written your title page, your abstract, your introduction, and your thesis, you're tired. You've done a lot of research. The last thing you want to do is keep writing, but it's actually kind of the fun part because now you get to, depending on your thesis, either analyze your topic, explain your topic, or argue your topic. So they're all fun in their own way. So anyhow, this is the place where you're going to sew up all the various threads of your research and you're going to bring it together in a cohesive narrative. It is a minimum of 1,500 words for your lit review, and we'll go over that in a minute. All right, so lit review. You begin by providing an interpretation of your results. What is it that you've learned from your research? You're going to discuss your hypothesis or research question more in depth. Remember, do not repeat what you've already said in your results. Instead, focus on adding new information and broadening the perspective of your results. You're going to discuss how your results compare to previous findings in the literature. If there are differences, you're going to talk about why they exist. You're going to consider your study's limitations. And you're also going to consider new things as well. All right, here's something really important. Those 4 required references, you have to use them in your literature review. So again, you must have 4 references in your annotated bibliography, which is due in the upcoming weeks, which I'll explain later during those weeks. And each one of the 4 references must be cited at least 1 time in your lit review. You can have more than 4 references, but you must at least have the 4, and they must be the required type. So 1 book, 1 magazine, newspaper, just like I covered a second ago. And each reference has to have either a quote or a paraphrase and an in-text citation per APA in your lit review. Now, as you can see, I said only 1 time. So at a minimum, you're going to have in your 1,500 words 4 quotes. This is where originality plays a role. As you know, you can only have 15% originality per your VeriCite similarity report. This is because I do not want to read a paper full of quotes that you've compiled of somebody else's studies. I want to hear your opinions and what you learned from that research. So what you're going to see a lot from me during my review of the literature is not a review of your grammar. I do not do that on your literature review. I do not review the grammar, punctuation, spelling until your final completed research paper is turned in, and you will have a peer draft review done of that. All I'm doing is, do you have the right words? Is the content right? Is it APA right? Or do you have too many quotes? So really pay attention to that. All right, your thesis statement. That's why in last week's introduction and thesis was so important, because your thesis statement is going to give you a roadmap for your literature review. And what do I mean? Well, here's an example. Let's say your thesis statement was, the reasons for prison overcrowding in America are shameful. we're going to discuss the shameful reasons are it causes aggression, causes inmates to kill, and causes higher rates of illness. So that's your thesis statement. It's kind of a rough thesis statement, but that's your thesis statement. So in your discussion in your lit review, you're going to talk about, there's going to be a part that you talk about how prison overcrowding causes aggression. There's going to be a part where you talk about how it causes inmates to kill, and there's going to be a part that you talk about how it causes higher rates of illness. So you are basically, your lit review or your discussion is justifying your thesis statement. So make sure you talk about these facts, because then you're going to have your conclusion and you're going to summarize it. All right. Last week, I showed you the thesis builder and outline builder. Here's the website. I highly recommend you go to this thesis and outline builder, because what it does is it's really cool. It's going to ask you questions like, what's your topic? What's your main opinion? And you fill in, where I wrote in red is where you fill it in. You're going to answer all these questions. And what it does is it gives you a rough look at what your thesis statement is. And then it also gives a rough look at what your discussion should look like. So this is what your thesis should look like, and that's what you did last week. And then here's an idea of, a real rough idea of what you should write in your introduction, your body paragraph first, the second body paragraph, the third. And like I said, it doesn't write it for you, but it gets you started, which is sometimes the most difficult thing to do. All right, really quick on conclusions. I said I was going to cover that, even though it's not due this week. The conclusions wrap up what you've been discussing in your paper, and be very careful. I don't want to read a repeat of your conclusions in the abstract and introduction. One of the toughest part of writing a research paper is making sure your abstract is different than your introduction, and they are both different than your conclusion. They all want to read differently. So a lot of times you're just figuring out how to reword the same thing so it doesn't sound exactly the same. All right, so your conclusion should begin pulling back into more of a general information that is a kind of stairs of your paper. It restates the main point of your argument or your explaining or what you've analyzed. And it also, which is huge, it calls for an action or overview of future possible research. So you must have a plan, not just a statement, but a plan. And I'll give you an example what I mean. So your conclusion must have a plan of how to fix or better the problem or issue. You just don't want to state, for example, if prison is overcrowded, or you did a paperwork on police departments use too much force. You don't want to make a statement in your conclusion that says more training is needed for mental illness, or for use of force situations, or for how to not get prisons overcrowded, whatever it may be. You don't want to just make a one sentence statement. Instead, you're going to write about 1 to 4 paragraphs or about a page of a detailed plan. If training is what you think needs to be done to fix the problem or better understand it, then you need to talk about when that training will occur. Is it once a month? Is it quarterly? Is it only once a year? Is it 8 hours a day once a year, or 2 hours a day every week? Who will do the training? Where will the training occur? How will you test if the training is working? And what will you do if the training doesn't work? So this is really huge to have in your conclusion. All right, finally, again, your conclusion, you're going to restate your topic, why it's important, restate your thesis claim. You can address opposing viewpoints and explain why readers should align with your position. That's why I want to hear your voice in this. And again, there's that start item. You're going to have a call for action, detailed of what needs to be done in the future. All right, that ends this video.